So today I thought I'd take a look at some of my favourite games of all time. Now, if you follow me on Twitter, if you watch my videos over on the Steam Company, you know that I'm a bit of a game fan. I mention it every now and then in Q&As. In general, I talk about games a lot on Twitter. I've been playing games since I was a kid, since I was like probably like 5 years old. I had a Spectrum with a game called Dizzy on there, which was like a side-scrolling adventure game where you basically did loads of puddles, and I was obsessed with games ever since then. None of those games made the cut from the Spectrum in this list, but I thought I'd talk today about some of the games that influenced me, that I liked, my top 10 games for me personally throughout my life. Now, obviously nostalgia tinges these things quite a lot, but I think I can safely say that I'm a bit of a gamer, and I do like the immersion and escapism you get from games. I think as an art form, it's incredibly underappreciated by many people. It's that thing that relaxes me more than anything. Now, a few caveats I'll add to this personally. There's certain series of games that I've not included, even though maybe individual episodes of those series would warrant being in this list. Like Mario Kart, it's just a broad spectrum for me. I've loved every Mario Kart game ever, so I've not included that because I can't choose a favourite one. Same with Football Manager or Championship Manager it used to be. There's certain years I've played more of that. But it's too broad a game to be thrown in there for me personally. And same with things like The Sims years ago, and maybe all the games like FIFA and Pro Evolution. I played a lot of ISS when I was younger and Pro Evo. I love those games. I played them constantly, but they're too broad a game to be included in my personal top 10 list. I just kind of like a continuing love there. So they're not in there, even though maybe some of those titles individually wouldn't usually warrant there. But it's a diverse list, and one that kind of sums me up as a person, I think. Now, the first one, this may surprise a few people, is actually Far Cry 3. Now, I don't actually think this is in the top 10 games I've ever played, weirdly. I don't think the quality of it is actually up there. I think I can probably name 20, 30 games better than it that I personally played. But in terms of favourites, it's definitely up there, flaws and all. I don't know what it is about Far Cry 3, but the first time I played it, I think it was the first time I played an open world shooter like that actually captured that sense of adventure. Now, for me, it was just as much about the gameplay as it was about the actual environment. Running around that tropical island with all the wild animals, the crocodiles. The first time a crocodile grabbed me when I kind of stepped into its river. That was terrifying. And then the sharks out there, and then seeing the ostriches, or whatever they're called, cassowaries or something like that, seeing them roam about, just attacking you, all the hunting and all the crafting and all that kind of stuff. I think it was the first time I've been really thrown into a game, and it just struck me, as well as the incredible soundtrack. There was nothing quite like the sense of adventure that game kind of brought out of me personally. I'd go around one corner, you'd see the stunning waterfall, and under it there'd be a cave, and you'd go in that cave because you'd know to look under there, because there's always a cave under a waterfall, and you'd go in there and you'd swim around, you'd find these weird artifacts, and the collectibles were fun. I love Far Cry 3 because it really kind of it captured this feeling of just being lost on an island, and the missions were fun, they were explosive. Now, Far Cry 4 I thought was absolutely fantastic as well, probably a better game technically, but Far Cry 3 really grabbed me in. Now, it's got a bit derivative in terms of Primal and Far Cry 5, it's all a little bit samey now these days, but Far Cry 3, that was a genuine classic in my personal opinion. Now, the next one, number 9 on this list, is Super Mario World. I've actually got a Super Mario Cup right there. Super Mario World was the first game that actually came with my Super Nintendo back when I was like 9 years old, and that game absolutely blew my mind. Super Mario World is a fantastic game. Simply put, it's probably the best 2D platformer of all time. It's just fantastic. The adventures, the lands, the characters, the design, the simplicity of the play, the feel like you can pick up now and just play it and perfectly know what's going on. It's a fantastic game. It was also the first game that I remember feeling incredibly challenged by. Now, it was intricate, but it was always fair at the same time, and it was just a diversity in the levels in terms of how the mechanics constantly changed, and all the kind of vibrancy in the colours and the animations with Mario and Yoshi, and just general little things like the feathers and the boos and the way the character them. Oh, it was just fantastic. I mean, I remember sitting there being obsessed with the maps and exploring different levels and trying to find the secret passages. Mario World is a fantastic platformer, and even though it may not be the best game I've ever played on a technical level, for what it's worth, it can totally consume my childhood. Now, number 8 is actually Red Dead Redemption. No, not Red Dead Redemption 2, which I'm currently playing through. Actual Red Dead Redemption 1, the first one. For me, this was everything that I wanted from Grand Theft Auto and more. I remember the first time I played by this, and I actually felt like a badass. I remember sat there thinking, this game has everything. It's just the atmosphere and the music, and I love games with a good score, and it had some beautiful moments, crossing over into Mexico with the sun, and some Spanish guitar kicking in. It just felt absolutely incredible. So epic, so cool. And the story and the writing, I remember being overwhelmed by it. It really involved in John Marston's story. Thinking, this is what games should be. 3. Now, I'm sure it's probably dated a little bit if you go back to it, but at the time, it felt immersive. At the time, it felt like an actual cowboy and had this sense of exploring the Wild West that no game had ever really come close to creating, in my personal opinion. Once again, as you can see, there's a bit of a theme here. I like games that have big immersive worlds, and at the time, Red Dead Redemption, it just had this brilliant balance between a great writing and story and this open atmospheric world with loads going on. And just this beautiful vistas that you could sit there and go, wow, just look at that. I loved it. I even loved the epilogue and how it opened up after you thought the whole game was done. It just kept going and going, and it was a beautiful game. Personally, GTA games, I've always really enjoyed them, but for me, they didn't have the serious tone, the writing that Red Dead Redemption did, and that's why I preferred that game. Breath of the Wild, the first, most recent game on this list in terms of releases. Breath of the Wild, for me, was the thing I've been waiting for a long time now. I'm a big Zelda fan. Plot spoiler there for later on this list, but Breath of the Wild was incredible. I absorbed that game. I spent 200 hours in that game, genuinely finding every shrine, finding as many Koroks as I could, and generally going around and just exploring every single avenue. Now, for me, what I loved about Breath of the Wild was for one, the mechanics and the open world, how reactive it was and how responsive it was in terms of everything you tried to do, be it the way that the physics or the chemistry would actually interact like it really would in real life, all that kind of stuff. The fact you could go anywhere, climb anywhere, do anything in any order, genuinely any order. Most games kind of hint at this idea of freedom, but not many actually execute it. And Breath of the Wild did. I also loved how quiet and calm it was. At no point did the game ever rush you. At no point did you ever feel like you're constantly under attack or being forced to do this and that. You could have moments where you just stroll peacefully across this beautiful open green glade, and then you just stumble across something because you saw a hill or a mound or a castle or an old piece of ruin that just begged to be explored, and you'd go there and you knew usually you'd be rewarded with something, and then you'd see something incredible like these dragons floating above you or a giant Hinox beast or something totally unexpected. And that's what I loved about it. It wasn't a perfect game, no, but for me it captured that sense of adventure I hadn't felt in a game since I was a kid. It was an absolutely beautiful all-encompassing adventure of a game, and just so many different missions, so many different little random things, full of character, and the score understated but beautiful, absolutely stunning. Breath of the Wild for me was a masterpiece of hurry up Nintendo and get the sequel out. 6, a totally different kind of game, but one that I immediately had to play again. It was The Last of Us. Now, I remember playing The Last of Us the first time. I think it was the first time I played any of Naughty Dog's games. I hadn't played any Uncharted games at the time. And I was immediately blown by how good it looked and how much like a film it felt like. I know that's a cliche, but The Last of Us had this cinematic thing to a vibe, and there was a sucker punch of a start with that emotional intro. I wasn't prepared for that. I wasn't prepared for it at all. But it took me on a literal journey along with the characters who were both excellently written. Joel and Ellie, beautifully voiced, incredibly intricate characters, loads of emotion, beautiful environments once again, genuinely scary at times, but just a stunning adventure that never at any point overstayed its welcome. The gameplay itself in general was quite simple, really. Go here, lift that, get across this, kill this, but it was just the story and the places that it took you upon. I never wanted it to end, and when it eventually did, it's the first time I immediately started the game again and then completed it again. I did that with Last of Us like twice, where I went up different higher levels of difficulty. And I didn't regret it because it felt better each time I played it. For me, The Last of Us was a masterclass in story writing, a masterclass once again in the score, the design, the visuals. It's just a phenomenal game. And 5 was still my most enjoyed first-person shooter of all time, Goldeneye. Yes, Goldeneye on the N64. Now, a lot of games have come along and been a lot better technically since that was first released. I don't doubt that at all. But Goldeneye for me, oh my god, I've lost count of how many hours I spent playing on that game, playing it through on different levels of difficulty, and also wasting it on multiplayer with my friends. Still the best ever multiplayer game out there in my personal opinion. Maybe it's been kind of technically beaten now, but at the time it was phenomenal. It was just the kind of thing you'd sit there for hours with your friends. You'd all have your own missions and favourite characters, different levels, and you'd have your own little ways of playing, but it was just incredibly fun. Perfect Dark came along, wasn't quite as good as that, and still couldn't quite master the same level of ability, and I enjoyed that a lot, but GoldenEye for me was always the #1 shooter of that era. Fantastic game, incredibly, once again, incredibly loyal to the film, the music, the score, feeling like Bond when I was a young kid. It just was absolutely everything, and I still have that incredible understanding of every level. I can tell you where anything is on any levels because I played it so often. GoldenEye is a classic. And #4, a totally different game, and this to me was so impactful because it was the first time I played a game like this properly and gone for it. It was Final Fantasy VII. I played this on the PlayStation 1 a little bit later than most did, and I remember it taking over about 50-60 hours of my life and being totally blown away by this incredible, weird, weird and wonderful world with this mental plot and this incredibly cool bad guy in Sephiroth, and Cloud's weird story about him being almost like some weird kind of clone thing and not being sure what he is or whose identity was, and then being in love with Ares and Tifa, and then Barrett's crazy finger up, weird kind of gun arm, and then this weird casino up in the sky. It was a really surreal game, but I absolutely loved it. It took us on an adventure across this open, huge world full of these weird and wonderful enemies, this crazy plot about the life force, but once again, the songs are behind it, the music and the sense of scale was just on another level. And as you can already tell, if they get some music right and it gets a sense of scale right in the adventure, I'm a sucker for that kind of stuff. And Final Fantasy as well, it was also the first game ever when I was about 13 that actually made me cry, genuinely. There's a twist in it towards the end, which I was not expecting, and being a young, impressionable male at the time, it got me emotionally, it actually hit me, and it was just a bit much, but it was phenomenally written, unexpected, and I just remember tearing up. I wasn't sobbing, but I was like, what just happened? An incredible game, and genuinely one of the best of all time. No wonder it's had about 1 billion reboots from different consoles, because it's iconic for a reason. And this is where we get to the very difficult bit. Any of these games from 3 onwards could be my number one, but this one in particular is a weird one on this list, and most people are like, what, really? But it's Banjo Kazooie on the N64. It's still, in my personal opinion, the best platform game ever made. Super Mario 64, it was just basically the platform that Banjo Kazooie built on. Super Mario 64 was fantastic, but Banjo Kazooie was that with added charm, added character, added tunes, added world design. It was everything that Mario 64 did, but better. Banjo Kazooie is still a kind of game that holds up really well now. If you play it, the controls are intuitive, the level design is short, sweet, and beautiful, full of character. The music is absolutely fantastic. Every single one of the tunes on that level, be the way it dynamically shifts if you go underwater or really high up and goes echoing distancy, or marimba bass if you go underwater and goes all weird. All the tunes shifted and moved with the music and the action, and they were all massive earworms. You have him in his head for days afterwards. It was just the characters as well, the writing, it was funny, it was endearing, it was charming, and the levels, there was not a single moment where it let up and it wasn't brilliantly addicted to play. Still, in my opinion, the best platformer ever made, and that includes your Crashes, your Marios, it includes your Ratchet and Clanks, your Spyros, and that kind of stuff. Banjo Kazooie was an absolute masterpiece, just totally underappreciated because it wasn't made directly by Nintendo. I think people need to wake up and realise how good a game that was. The most fun, joyous, vibrant game I've ever played in my life. Banjo Kazooie, deservedly at number 3. And this is when I get to the top 2, and once again, either of these could be switched, but the second on the list is Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. Now, to give you a bit of context, I was always a Nintendo fan. I already played Zeldas on the Super Nintendo and so on. And I was waiting for this game on the N64, this 3D game, 3D Zelda game. Now, that sounds weird looking back now, you're like, so what, a 3D Zelda game? At the time, this was the first one. This was an open adventure on a scale that generally hadn't been seen before on a console like this. It was just phenomenal. This huge open world with massive volcanoes, a huge open lake, a massive open hub field called Hyrule. You could run around, and then the castles, and then the weirdness, massive huge monsters and bosses to fight that were giant dragons, all this kind of stuff. It was just scintillatingly good. It received vast critical acclaim. You can see why now it's still tops list of the best game of all time. Once again, it hasn't aged perfectly because obviously those mechanics have been done better now. But at the time, honestly, I was 15 or 14 years old playing that, and my head was absolutely overwhelmed with epicness and coolness. Just the way that it reimagined everything I'd seen on the 2D kind of level games into this huge world. It was just an absolute feat of engineering. And once again, the tunes, the Zelda epic tunes, reimagined beautifully. The Gerudo Valley song is still actually my ringtone on my phone, and that's actually true. They were just something else, and had so much fun just galloping across Hyrule Field on a pony with a horse there, and that, more than anything, that game particularly inspired my sense of adventure as a young person. I wanted to go and climb in caves in real life or climb up hills and mountains in real life because of Zelda. That's literally what it did for me, and that's why it'll always be my second favourite game ever, but not number 1. And number 1 actually is the game that precursed Ocarina of Time, and it is A Link to the Past on the Super Nintendo. Now, this isn't the prettiest game of all time, it isn't the most epic or biggest game of all time, but firstly, it was the game that I first realised that I enjoyed these adventure games like that, and Link to the Past was an absolute phenomenal game. Yes, now, obviously Ocarina of Time took everything that Link to the Past did and made it bigger and better and beautiful, but Link to the Past really, really affected me as a young lad. It made me just, I was lost to that game entirely. I wouldn't leave the house, I'd play it for hours, and then Be it just going through kind of desert areas, or the getting lost in the Last Woods trying to find the Master Sword, or up on Death Mountain, seeing it change the Dark World unexpectedly, the twists like that, and it once again as well, the music, the design, the huge world, the kind of playfulness of playing with the cuckoos, the chickens, basically like these weird chicken things, but the Zelda versions of them, winding them up and getting attacked by them, or the skull disappearing in the forest as he played his little kind of flute. It was just a game full of wonder, genuine wonder. The story, the music, the design, everything about the game to me summed up my sense of adventure as a kid. So that's it. That is my 10 favourite games of all time. There's loads and loads of honourable mentions. Wind Waker, Majora's Mask, the Zelda games, Link Between Worlds, all those three, even Twilight Princess. I've loved all these absolutely loads. And recent games as well. Horizon Zero Dawn, I thought, was an absolute masterpiece of a game. Maybe that could have been on there too. Even Spider-Man recently was fantastic. Not top 10 material, but a fantastic game. One that really, really close was Metal Gear Solid 4. That to me was just a surreal experience. Didn't quite make the list, but that was definitely in the top 15 for me. A phenomenal, weird game from Kojima there. Metal Gear Solid 4 could have been on there, as could have Metal Gear Solid 1. And then there was also loads of possible entries from the Uncharted series. I've loved every one of those games that I played. Maybe that could have been on there another day. Maybe number 2 potentially, probably my favourite, or 4. And Far Cry 4 could have been on there potentially. GTA games, obviously we all love them. Andreas, number 3, Vice City. Didn't get into 4 and 5 as much, loved them, but didn't get, they're not like, didn't affect me emotionally. But any of those games could have been up there too, and there's shitloads more that I probably forgot. Anyway, that's my top 10 games I've ever. I hope you enjoyed that list. Let me know what your list is, and if you're new to this channel, click subscribe, and let me know what else you want me to see talk about on this channel, because it's your channel to discuss random shit with me. Anyway, I'm going to finish my Mario brew. Right, in a bit. See you later.